Hey guys, this is Ant. It's been quite a while since I've done a tutorial, but I'm going to bring an updated one now to kind of break the gap. The request was to make a flashlight system with a working battery bar and one which had batteries as well. I think that was what the request was asking for. What I'll do is I'll quickly demonstrate that. So I've hit play, and obviously it's not the right environment, but you can see it anyway. The player presses the F key to switch the flashlight on. You can see the battery charge going down, draining it. As soon as it runs out, it won't power on. Hit the F key, nothing happens. Hit the G key, it'll take the battery off, put the charge back in, and then you can do it again. So first things first, I'm going to delete the first person character out of the world. The main reason I want to do that is because I want to create my own characters to create the blueprint in. It makes it easier, plus you can always keep the first person character as a backup as well, in case anything goes wrong. So all you do is you find it in the world outliner or in the navigation window, delete it. Next thing you need to do, I've already done it here but I'll demonstrate anyway, is to right click on the first person character within the first person PP and the blueprints folder and just hit duplicate, and then it'll come an option with the same character, and I've just called mine my character just so I can remember it. What will happen is if you need to obviously set it so that my character is the one that spawns the one that you want to, with the working blueprints. So all you do is you go into settings, project settings, maps and modes, and then what you do is where it says default pawn class here, change that to my character, or whatever the character you called it, it should be in this drop down. Select that, hit Ctrl and S to save, and that's that bit set up. So now you're ready to begin editing the character. Okay, now that the project's set up so that when the character spawns, it's basically your character. You can always check this as well if you just hit play and hit Shift and F4, and then you should be able to find my character in the navigation pane there. Obviously if you don't, just go back into your project settings, just check to see if it's your character that's been selected. The other thing to do as well, make sure you've deleted the first person character out of the world. So I'm going to go into my character. Now, if you followed the previous tutorials, you'll see a basic rudimentary flashlight system, which is basically, it uses the F key, it flip-flops between toggle on, toggle off. The actual flashlight as well is bound to the first person camera, and its default visibility is set to be off. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a battery bar and a battery system for it. So first thing that we need to do is we need to create a variable, and what I'm going to do is the first one I'm going to call, that's going to be a float value, and that's going to be battery life. Hit compile, and then I'll just drag that in there. The next one, it's another variable, it's going to be an integer. And I'm going to call this number of batteries. Hit compile again. Now the reason why I've chosen number of batteries to be an integer rather than a float is you would never have 1.75 batteries. No one would ever say that in the real world. You'd have whole numbers of batteries. So for the default value, I'm going to set that to 3. The battery life by default comes in at 0, but I want that to be a float that can basically drop down from 100% to 0. So I'm going to set that to 100.0. Like I say, that makes it a bit more dynamic, so that you could set that to be represented as a percentage rather than which isn't necessarily a whole number. So you can make it as complicated as you want. But for now, I'm just going to create a float at 100. So now that we've got the two variables, we need to create a system that will basically allow battery to be drained and for batteries to be consumed. So I'm going to go through the actual battery to be consumed as well, and tie it in here to these toggle visibility nodes. In order to do this, a lot of people would use an event tick and basically say, okay, then event tick. Basically, I'll put a branch to say it's been used, or I don't know. I'll just demonstrate now. Flashlight is on. In fact, I'll create another variable as well because we need that. We're going to create a boolean. We'll need this later on. Always use positives as well when you're creating booleans. Never use double negatives like flashlight is off, false, or anything like that. Just have it as something that is the flashlight on, yeah, true or false, that sort of thing. So hit compile. I don't know. The flashlight's on. Get that. And for the sake of argument, we'll grab a setter in as well. So that check's always there. And what we'll do is make sure that default value is false. If it's true, minus float. Set battery life. This is just an example. I just want to explain what I mean by this as well. And what we'll do is we'll put a print string as well. There we go. So that's a conversion node there, converting a float into basically a string. So it'll set to true and it'll basically fire that. So just demonstrate that for a second. You see what happened there? As soon as I press F, it basically drains that. And the only way to do it is by setting a delay. But the only problem is with setting delays on the system is it'll still pulse it. It'll trigger the delay every second. It's just not a very efficient way of doing it. Plus, with using event ticks as well, they're very demanding on systems. So if you wanted to have a game for a mobile app, like an Android system, which doesn't have the same sort of CPU or graphics intensity as a PC-based unit, for example, then it's just going to create enormous drain. The game just will not work on a mobile platform. So what I'm going to show you next is I'm going to show you a system called using timers. It's a lot more reliable and it's easier to use. So I'll delete all these, delete that as well, we don't need that for a second, and I'll delete that there. So to create this system using a timer, we need to create an event. So basically with the flashlight, it's going to have two states. It's either going to be on and off. So what we need to do is we need to create two custom events to represent that. So first one I'm going to call flashlight on. Keep it there. Next, right click, type in custom event, add custom event, flashlight off. Oh, my bad. So now we've got the two conditions basically for the flashlight being either on or off. So if we just plug this into here, flashlight is on, and what we'll do is flashlight is off. So basically we have the ability now to say, okay, then once the visibility on, the flashlight is on, and we can trigger something out of these custom events. So what we'll do is we're going to get set timer by event. We're going to plug this in here, and what we're going to do is we're going to change this to that we want it to loop. Obviously we want something that takes off an amount. I'm going to set it to 1 second just for demonstration, but you can set that to be whatever time you feel fit for yeah, how often your battery drains, how fast basically. So let's see, what we need to do now is we've got the timer by events. We need to basically set a handle for it. Now what the handle does is it controls the it's like a clock in the system. So as soon as the set timer is used, it'll basically start a clock somewhere in the system. Now this clock will basically switch on and off when you tell it to. If you don't tell this handle to basically switch off, it will keep running, and multiple handles can cause quite a lot of problems. So you've got to, you know, they are powerful, but you've got to control them. So now that's been created, put timer handle there. For anyone that missed that, that was just literally right click the return value and then promote to variable. And then all I do is it comes up with this timer handle variable type, just call it that. I'll call mine timer handle. So if I hit compile, it comes up with an error. Now I've done this on purpose. The reason why it's come up with an error is because it needs basically an event to be driven into. So I've already got the flashlight off, but that doesn't make any sense. You know, you wouldn't set the flashlight on to the off. Where it needs another custom event. So what you do, right click, custom event, add custom event. Now, what do we want the flashlight to do when it's switched on? We want it to drain the battery. So that's what we call a custom event. Now, what will happen is when the player basically fires this executable pin through here to switch the flashlight on, it'll set this timer. Now what will happen is it'll trigger the event below it, which is this battery drain. So as soon as that fires through, you hit compile, there you go, it'll fire that. Now I can demonstrate that as well. It might be a bit tricky, but try and get it so that you can see this logic in action. So just hit play a second. I'm in the window. Set that to my character. There. You can see it there. When I'm toggling the F key, you can see the executable pin firing the window. Just here. So now we know that we've got basically the event system set up. The next part will move on to the actual battery charge itself. Okay, so now that we've got the events we need, we're going to set up the battery drain system. So we've already got the battery drain custom events here. We're going to create the logic so that whenever the flashlight's switched on, it'll basically start to drain the battery. Now, as I said before, the battery life is set to 100 floats. You can set that to whatever you want it to be, but I'm going to use 100 now just for demonstration. So what we need is something to be subtracted from battery life. So if you drag out of the pin there, minus the float. So in this case it'd be 1. So you can set that to anything you want, but if you wanted a bit more control over it, you could actually promote this to a variable. And you could call that something, so drain battery amount, for example. That makes it a bit more controllable, so that you could add this variable anywhere else into the graph and basically change that amount at any time. So what we're doing is battery drain amount currently is set to 0. We need to compile it as well. And that's 10. I'm going to set that to 10. So basically, whenever it's activated, it will go 100 minus 10 every 1 second using this set timer. So what we've done is we've subtracted that. We want to set the battery life. So if I drag out a print string, here it demonstrates. I'm going to just show you on screen. So when I press the F key, there you go, you can see it ticking down at the There you go. 30, 10, 0, minus 10. It's not clamped yet, so obviously that'll keep changing. But you can see that it's working. That's in place. So what we'll do is we shall just alt left click that, and we'll just keep the print string there just for testing purposes. So obviously it's basically reached 0. So what do we want to do is we want to make a check to see if that battery is basically 0, if it equals 0. So what we'll do is we'll get an equals floats. Let's come up with a Boolean check from a branch. We'll plug that in there, connect that. So what will happen is it'll drain through, it'll keep going, and it'll keep performing every time it ticks a check to basically see does it equal 0. If it's true, we want to call the flashlight off. So drag out of the true node, call function flashlight off. So basically that'll fire into that once that's finished. So when the flashlight's off, we'll need to stop this timer because it'll just keep going basically. It'll keep basically ticking down. That'll never stop. It'll just basically repeat itself to infinity. So what we need to do is we need to get the timer. Remember that this is linked into this event here. We set it for the specific set timer. And what we see, we drag out of this and we want clear and invalidate timer by handle. So basically it's got this here, that'll stop the timer from happening again. So if we go into the map, we'll hit play. But this is the thing. This is where the issues lie with, we've discovered an issue here. It's been more than 10 seconds and the flashlight isn't turning itself off. Now the reason for this is it's because of this, it doesn't know what to do here. It's basically saying, well, I don't know what to do next. This time has stopped, but we've got no way of firing into this section. And it's because of these toggle visibility nodes. They're in the wrong place. Now, flip-flop has been used in a previous video. I admit that I've used it before in tutorials, but the system for flip-flop is too constrained. This node will always alternate between A and B. It's never got any, it's not suitable for a dynamic system that we want to create. So what we're going to do is, the flip-flop's basically, it's run its course, we want something better, we want a better flashlight system, we're going to delete that. What we want is, we want a system where we can actually check, we can switch the visibility based on the events, and we'll have another system in place to control this. So we're going to move this top event here so that the first toggle visibility is actually activated when the timer comes on. So you probably guessed it, the second one, the toggle visibility, is going to come down here. Now the only problem is we've got an F function with nothing there basically. Well, how do we alternate between the pressed from the flashlight being on and the off? Well, we can use a branch check. So we've got the flashlight on, but we've also got another variable in place as well. I want to check so that if the battery life equals 0, or if it's greater, is it greater than that? Does the battery have a great value greater than 0? Obviously, we've put a mathematic thing there, which basically converts into a Boolean, and it's checked there. So we could tie this in, but this single Boolean doesn't actually take into account whether the flashlight is already on, so we need to use this other one here, which is also a Boolean. Now some people might ask, well, why don't you use an AND node? And basically won't work for this because this variable here can still be true if this one is basically, if the flashlight's on. The battery life can still be higher than 0 even if the if the flashlight is on or off, and that creates problems further down the line. So what we need to do is we need to perform this check first and then this check separately. If anyone knows a better way of doing that, if anyone can message me or anything to say this is how you do it, I'd appreciate that. But for this tutorial, then I'll just keep that the same because it works. Now you might think, okay then, we've got this flashlight on. Okay then, so is the flashlight on? Yes or no? So, by default it's false. So if the flashlight's already on, then we want to switch off. And this is basically another way of flip-flopping between the thing. You just switch the the logic around, so that if the flashlight's, if it's already on, if that's true, switch it off. Now, if the flashlight is, if it's off or if it's set to false, switch it on. So you ask, well, okay then, we've got this boolean here. How do we determine that this is true or false? How do we set that? And we do it here. We use a set node. So, as soon as the flashlight's turned on, we set that to true. As soon as the flashlight's turned off, we set that to false. Now we know that when we alternate here, that the checks are always done there. In fact, just delete that. So we'll do a bit of a test, shall we? Let's just see if the logic's working. There, flashlight's on. So I'm going to leave it 10 seconds. I should have plugged in the print string, but it should switch off on itself. Hopefully anyway. Yeah, it switched off. I'm pressing F. It's just not having any of it. It's not switching on at all. So we know now that this system is working in place, and it performs the 2 checks. It clears the handle, and it also takes into account the fact that the flashlight state can either be on or off, and it sets it using one Boolean function. So now that this blueprint has been set up to basically control the logic for the charge, what I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you next the actual number of battery system. So that actually it uses batteries, so that you have to reload it once it's filled up. Once it's been once the battery's been used, you press G, it'll put another battery into the flashlight and basically set the charge back to 100. Okay, so we're going to go on to the battery system, like we say. So we've already created a variable here for number of batteries. So what we need to do is we need to basically create an input so that the player can do that. Now there's 2 ways you can do it. You could either go into the project settings, you could go into input, action mappings, and you can add an action map in there. For quickness, I'm just going to type in here input G, and that'll be our control. So player presses G, and that'll enable us to basically load a battery into the torch. So first check we need to do is we need to make sure that the number of batteries is greater than 0. If the player doesn't have any batteries, they can't use it. So we'll just literally right arrow, basically, so we can call a greater than node, branch, which always follows that, and that's the first check. In fact, it'll give me a bit of breathing room as well. Let's move that there. That's it. So that's the first check. So we've done the first check. We basically check we've got enough batteries. If that's true, we're going to get the number of batteries. We're going to use a minus integer to subtract 1, and then from that we're going to set number of batteries. You can type it there or you can drag it in. I think you drag it in, hold Alt, and it will basically drop a set in. If you drag it in by default, it'll just drop a getter, and I think that's control. So if that's true, it sets the number of batteries to 0. So we'll just do a quick check to make sure that that's working. Again, conversion to a string, hit compile, hit play, and I'm just pressing G. So yeah, so you can see in the top corner 2, 1, 0. Now it stops at that first check because obviously we can't subtract. It's basically it's not greater than 0. We can't go any further, which is that maths check. So we basically said, yep, we've pressed G. We know that we've got more batteries greater than 0. Like I say, we're using whole numbers, so that can be 1 or higher. We've confirmed that's true. We're basically saying, okay, then we've set the number of batteries to -1, and we've set that number again. Just disconnect these. In fact, we'll delete that again. So we want that to have an immediate effect on the battery charge. So what we can do is, the battery life. We can basically set that. .1, and that performs that basic check there, so it'll set that. Now the only problem here is you're going to have trouble with the battery. It'll keep adding 100 to it because it's not clamped. So what we need to do is you can do that. You can put set battery life and basically say, okay, then I want that there as a set, and I'll just keep doing it, but it's not as dynamic. So get the battery life plus float. Now we can promote that to a variable as well. We can turn around and say, okay, then I want to control how much the battery is given the game. So that can be done in a sort of, this event. So battery charge restore, we'll just call that. You can call that anything you like, but I'm going to call that charge restore. And for the sake of argument, I'm going to call that 101. So like I say, you've got to put a bit more figure using the variable. You don't have to go into the blueprints individually and say, okay, then I want, I'm going to change that number here, I'm going to change that number down here, and I'm going to change that number there. It just gives you that little bit of control. So we're going to clamp that. So we want to clamp float. The minimum value is 100, and then we want to set battery life. So I'm just going to do another check here just to test that the system's working. Hit compile, hit play. So flashlight's on. It should run out of charge any seconds. 10 seconds have gone. 100. Flashlight switches off. It switches on again. Now just make sure that it charges properly as well. So I'm just going to make sure that the charge is actually keeping it as well. So I'm just going to Control W to duplicate that node. And I'm just going to do a bit of debugging here. Just about, it's literally just a case. I want to see the charge on the screen. I don't want to just guess, because like I say, it's using there 90, 70, 60, stop, 50, 40, 30, 20, and 0. Hit G, comes to 100 again, 90, 80. So what? Okay, then somebody's accidentally put a battery and chucked out the old one. Set to 100, 19, 80, 70. 60. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So that system's working in place, and it's taking into account that the, you know, whenever the charge is switched on or off, it's basically taking down to where it was. Also, when you're pressing G, it's adding 100 charge and setting it. So that's basically everything we need for the battery and the charge system. So now the next stage, I'm going to show you how to put it onto the HUD so that the information is visible to the player. Okay, so to create the widget interface, all we need to do is right click in the content browser window anywhere here, scroll down a bit, and we're going to select widget blueprint. Battery info. I'm going to call mine, I've already got a battery bar there that I was using to basically bug test before, but I'm going to create another one. I'm just going to call this battery info. Once that's created, I'm going to double click on it, and that'll take us into the canvas window. So I'm going to create a couple of things for this. I'm going to create a text box. I'm going to anchor that to the bottom right here. I'm going to make this, just for demonstration, I'm going to make it size 50. I'm not going to spend too much time on doing on widgets. You know, there's quite a lot to go through with that. I'm just going to keep it simple for the tutorial, because I appreciate it's been quite a long tutorial as well. So drop that in there, set that to size 50. Again, change the anchors there so that it basically starts in the same places where the number of batteries are. Set that to 0. Size to contents, I'm going to place it next to that. I'm going to drop in a progress bar as well. So quickly, that's what I want basically to display the battery charge on screen. Blue, could change that to green instead to denote battery charge. And if you go into the progress window, you can see if you drag %, it fills up as well. But we'll keep that to 0. Also, anchor that to the bottom right as well. So while we're here, then we need to call the two variables in the my character blueprint, which is the battery life, which we're going to tie into the progress bar, and the number of batteries that we're going to tie into the text here, so it displays on information on screen. So I've got the progress bar selected. I might as well do that one first. So to basically create a binding to a variable into the character, if you go into the progress %, and then if you go to the right where it says bind, create binding, drag that out there for the time being, alt left click that. What we need to do is we need to type in get player character. Now we've called mine, we're going to cast to it, so cast to my character, connect that there. I'm going to duplicate the return node so that if there's nothing casting, it'll always return a default value of 0. So once that's connected up, we need to call the variable from my character, which is get battery life. It'll come up on the screen, get battery life. So the problem is now, if we just plug this in here, we know that we've used the value for 100 and 0 rather than 0.1. So if we go back into design, if you remember this bit where we're scrolling up from 0 to 1, we basically need to convert that so that it represents the same. So go back into your graph, drag out a battery life, and you want map range clamped. Now we know that the 0 values here. What's coming in is 100. What should be going out is 0.01. So it'll basically just convert the value in the main character to the value which is displayed on the interface. Once that's been done, plug that in here, hit compile. So we need to basically add this we need to add this widget to the screen. If we hit play, nothing appears. Widget's there, but we haven't called it yet. We can do that in my character. So if you go down to the section where it's got if HMD and motion controls are enabled, blah blah blah, alt left click that. We want this event begin play node. I'm going to drag out of that, type create widget, and we want battery info. Okay, creates the widget. Drag out the return value. If you type add, we want add to viewport. Hit compile. Now, if I just do a quick test, hopefully this should work. So, yeah, it's on, it switches off. So if you notice, I'm pressing the flashlight, it switches off. And basically it's there. Hit G. It's taking down the values, but it's also taking off the progress bar. There we go. So that's been replenished. We know that's working, that's fine. Next thing we need to take into account is the number of batteries. So we're going to select that 0 value, that text that just says 0. We're basically going to create a binding for that as well. So you go into content, text, and then create binding. So you might have guessed it, we know that the variable stored in the my character, we're going to get the player character. We're going to do exactly the same thing as we did before. We're going to cast to my character, disconnect that node, plug that into there, duplicate that node, type in just a default value of 0 as well, so that it basically, if it doesn't cast, it knows what to basically cast to. Return node. Now we know that what the name of the variable is. It's number of batteries. We're going to get the number of batteries. Okay then. So we're not going to clamp this because that's going to be a finite amount. We don't need to use the map range to clamp because we're not converting whole numbers. What we're going to do is we're going to just literally, we're going to plug that into there. We're going to basically drag the integer into the return node, which is a text value, and it will come up with toText integer by default. Hit compile. So we're using the battery up. Okay then, oh no, I don't want to write a charge. I'm going to reload the battery 2. It subtracts it. Again. Let's see. Obviously you can consume the amount of batteries, you know, obviously that's up to the player. You can set another condition if you wanted to. If the battery bar is full, then the player can't use that ability to put another battery in, but I don't want to go through that. Obviously appreciate that I've been on this tutorial for quite a long time, so I'm sure you guys, if you followed me this far, you can work that out for yourselves.